It begins with a story almost too disturbing to believe, one that investigators still struggle to fully understand, and one that forces anyone who hears it to question just how well they really know the people around them. This is a case built on secrecy, fear, and a single night that spiraled into one of the most shocking murders ever recorded. And yet what makes it truly terrifying is not just the crime itself, but the quiet, calculated way everything unfolded long before the violence erupted. It starts in a small, peaceful town, where crime is rare, and most families leave their doors unlocked. People here know one another. They trust one another. And in this community lived a young woman named Clara Reeves, a 27-year-old graphic designer whose life appeared simple, calm, and ordinary. She was soft-spoken, known for her warm smile, and had no enemies that anyone could think of. She lived alone, worked from home, kept to herself, and had a reputation for kindness. But what no one knew was that Clara had been hiding something she never shared with anyone, not even her closest friend. For months, Clara had felt like she was being watched. She told a colleague once, very casually, that she thought someone was following her, but quickly laughed it off as stress. She never reported anything to the police, and she never told her family. Instead, she tried to convince herself that it was her imagination. But late at night, she would hear faint footsteps near her apartment. Her mailbox would be left open, even when she was sure she had closed it. Small things would shift inside her home, nothing valuable missing, but objects moved just slightly as if someone had been there. Still, Clara kept quiet. She didn't want to seem paranoid. She didn't want to worry anyone. And she didn't want to believe that someone could be targeting her. But someone was. The person watching her wasn't a stranger. He wasn't someone passing through town. He was someone who had observed her for months, learning her schedule, her habits, her weaknesses. He had convinced himself that Clara was special, that she was meant to be close to him, that she just needed to be shown what he believed was the truth. His obsession began quietly, but gradually twisted into something dangerous, something violent, something completely unhinged. The shocking part is this: no one ever suspected him. To the outside world, he was polite, helpful, and so ordinary that he couldn't possibly be capable of anything harmful. He blended in perfectly. He smiled often. He went to work every morning, and yet every night, he stood outside Clara's apartment, watching the lights go off, one by one, watching her silhouette move behind the curtains, watching, waiting, planning. Everything came to a breaking point on a stormy night in October. Clara had been working late, unaware that someone had slipped inside her apartment earlier that day. Someone who had been hiding in the tiny space between the wall and her bedroom closet, barely breathing, silent as the storm raged outside. She entered her room, exhausted, unaware that someone else was already in there with her. Neighbors later reported hearing a strange thud, followed by a muffled scream, but the storm was loud, thunder echoed through the streets, and no one gave it much attention. For the next 3 hours, Clara's apartment remained lit, the curtain drawn shut, the entire neighborhood unaware of the horror taking place inside. When Clara didn't show up for a scheduled online meeting the next morning, her colleague assumed she overslept. When she didn't respond to messages, people assumed she was busy. It wasn't until her friend visited her apartment later that evening that anyone sensed something was wrong. The door was slightly open. Inside, lights were still on, and the apartment was freezing cold, as if the windows had been open all night. Her friend called out her name, expecting Clara to answer from another room, but the silence was heavy, suffocating, unnatural, and then she saw it, a smear of blood near the hallway, just a faint mark, almost invisible, unless you looked closely. Her heart dropped. She backed out of the apartment and called police immediately. What officers found inside shocked even the most experienced among them. This wasn't a simple break-in. It wasn't a robbery gone wrong. It wasn't a random act of violence. Everything was methodical, calculated, precise. Clara had been attacked in a way that suggested deep obsession, long-term surveillance, and complete emotional detachment. Her belongings were untouched. Her electronics weren't stolen. Her valuables were in place. Nothing was missing, except Clara herself. She was gone. Taken. And whoever did it had left no fingerprints, no footprints, no clues that made any sense. Investigators combed through Clara's life, searching for enemies, recent conflicts, arguments, anything that could point toward a suspect. But she had none. Her relationships were stable, her finances clean, her communication history normal, no threats, no strange messages, nothing alarming. But then they found something in her bedroom drawer, a small notebook with only one page written in it, a note she never showed anyone. It said, "I feel like someone's watching me. Maybe I'm overthinking. I hope I'm wrong." That one sentence changed everything. It confirmed one thing: Clara had sensed danger long before it arrived. But still the question remained, where was she now? For the next 2 days, the entire town joined the search. Drones, volunteers, police, dogs, everything was deployed. And then on the third day, a man walking his dog discovered something chilling deep in the woods. A trail of disturbed leaves, shoe marks, and then something worse. Something that brought the entire investigation to a stunned halt. It was Clara, or what remained of her. The crime was so brutal, so extreme, that even investigators described it as unlike anything they had ever seen in their careers. It wasn't random, it wasn't impulsive. It was controlled, personal, planned. The person responsible hadn't panicked. He hadn't rushed. He had taken his time, leaving behind a scene that pointed to something darker than anyone could imagine. And yet, there was still no suspect. Until they found one small piece of evidence that changed everything. What investigators discovered next wasn't dramatic, but it was the single detail that finally cracked open the truth. Hidden beneath Clara's fingernails were microscopic fibers, thin, dark threads from a jacket. They didn't match anything Clara owned. They didn't match anyone in her family or circle. And that meant one thing. During the attack, Clara had fought back. Those fibers were all detectives had. But they were enough to start narrowing the list of people who could have come into close physical contact with her. They began interviewing neighbors, co-workers, delivery drivers, anyone who might have been near her apartment that night. Most had clear alibis, except one. A man named Darren Holt, a quiet 32-year-old maintenance worker who lived 2 buildings away. He wasn't close to Clara, but he had fixed a broken window in her apartment 2 months earlier. His name might not have raised suspicion until detectives visited him for a routine interview. Darren wasn't home. His apartment was empty, his belongings gone, his car missing, no forwarding address, no explanation, no sign of a sudden move. He had vanished. That alone wasn't proof, but something about the sudden disappearance felt wrong. Detectives searched his rental history and discovered a disturbing pattern. He moved constantly, short-term leases, staying only a few months here and there. No close friends, no long-term relationships, and his previous employers described him the same way: quiet, polite, reserved, but strange around women. Still, nothing specifically tied him to the crime. Not yet. But then investigators looked deeper into his digital footprint. They recovered his old email accounts, old data files, and security footage from his previous rentals. And slowly a horrifying pattern emerged. Darren had been watching women for years. Not harming them, just watching, listening, collecting information. In every building he lived in, at least one woman reported strange noises, misplaced items, or the feeling that someone had been inside their homes. None of these reports were ever linked to Darren, until now. Police recovered deleted images from a device found in a storage unit he'd abandoned. They were blurry, taken through windows, cracks in doors, from outside balconies. And among those photos were pictures of Clara, zoomed in, at night, taken from less than 10 feet away. This was no coincidence. This was obsession. With this evidence, investigators issued a warrant and put out an alert for Darren nationwide. But they had no idea where he had gone, and no one had seen him since the night Clara disappeared. It felt like the trail had gone cold, until a highway patrol officer in another state reported a suspicious, abandoned car, parked deep in a wooded area. It was Darren's. Inside the car, officers found a map, a half-eaten meal, and a notebook filled with ramblings. Pages and pages about connection, purpose, destiny, and references to Clara by name. But what scared investigators most was the final line written in shaky handwriting. She didn't understand, but someone else will. This wasn't an escape note. This was a promise. Police swept the surrounding woods, searching mile after mile for any sign of him. For 2 days they found nothing. Then a team discovered a makeshift shelter hidden beneath layers of branches and debris. Inside they found clothes, water bottles, and a small camp stove. Darren had been living there. But he was gone again. For weeks authorities searched, following every possible lead. People reported sightings, none confirmed. He was always one step ahead, always leaving only a trace behind. It felt like a nightmare that would never end. Then everything changed when a woman in a nearby town called police to report something chilling. She had returned home from work to find her back door slightly open. Nothing stolen, nothing broken, but one thing was strangely out of place. Her bedroom window was unlocked, and on her nightstand was a small object she didn't recognize, a black thread, identical to the fibers found in Clara's case. Detectives knew immediately. Darren was looking for someone new. That night, they flooded the area with officers, drones, and K9 units. Every road leading into or out of the town was blocked. But Darren was desperate now, unpredictable, and dangerous. At 3 a.m., a patrol officer spotted movement near a wooded trail behind a housing complex. When they called out, the figure ran. A chase began. Silence shattered by shouts, branches snapping, officers sprinting through darkness. The suspect darted between trees with terrifying speed, but eventually, fatigue slowed him down. Officers cornered him near a riverbank, where he collapsed, exhausted, mumbling incoherent words. It was him. After months of fear, uncertainty, and chaos, Darren Holt was finally in custody. But the truth of what happened that night in Clara's apartment was far darker than investigators expected. During interrogation, Darren was calm, too calm. He spoke about Clara as if she was still alive, as if she had been chosen for something important, something beyond ordinary people's understanding. His ramblings made it clear. He believed Clara belonged to him, that her fear meant she was awakening, that the violence he committed wasn't violence at all, but a necessary transformation. It was delusion beyond comprehension. When confronted with the evidence, Darren showed no remorse, no emotion, no recognition of the horror he had caused. And the most disturbing detail of all, he claimed Clara wasn't the first woman he had awakened. Investigators combed through his travel history and discovered missing women from several states that matched the timeline of his moves. They still don't know how many victims there were. They may never know. The court found Darren legally responsible and sentenced him to life without parole, ensuring he would never again walk free. But for Clara's family, justice felt incomplete. Nothing brought her back. Nothing erased the fear she lived with in her final days. Nothing changed the fact that she sensed danger long before anyone believed her. And that's what makes this case so terrifying. Its quiet build-up. Its slow, creeping escalation. Its hidden warning signs that seemed too small to matter, until it was too late. Clara didn't know she was being hunted. She didn't know someone had studied her every move. She didn't know a nightmare was unfolding right behind her safe, quiet life. But the truth is this. Sometimes the most dangerous people are not the loudest ones. Not the angriest. Not the ones who make threats. Sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who watch silently from the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And this was the most shocking murder no one wanted to believe was real.